The reading for this morning is I hope to have an encouraging word for you all. It comes from Psalm 91. He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Almighty, will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress, my God in whom I trust. For he will deliver you from the snare of the fowler and from the deadly pestilence. He will cover you with his pinions, and under his wings you will find refuge. His faithfulness is a shield and a buckler. You will not fear the terror of the night, nor the arrow that flies by day, nor the pestilence that stalks in darkness, nor the destruction that wastes at noonday. 1,000 may fall at your side, 10,000 at your right hand, but it will not come near you. You will only look with your eyes and see the recompense of the wicked. Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your habitation, no evil shall befall you, no scourge come near your tent. For he will give his angels charge over you, to guard you in all your ways. On their hands they will bear you up, lest you dash your foot against a stone. You will tread on the lion and the adder, the young lion and the serpent you will trample underfoot. Because he cleaves to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name. When he calls to me, I will answer him. I will be with him in trouble. I will rescue him and honor him. With long life I will satisfy him and show him my salvation. The word of the Lord. You may be seated. A year ago, yesterday, our entire community woke up to a shocking new reality. And you don't need me to tell you this, and I will not go on to stir up any more traumatic memories, but our city looked like a war zone. It seemed like more trees were down than were standing. Houses were destroyed, cars were crushed, people were trapped in their homes and in their neighborhoods. And somehow, Hurricane Helene had made landfall over 800 miles south of us, yet had brought its wrath all the way, literally, to our doorsteps. And we knew it was coming, but literally no one could have predicted what actually happened. And like many of you, I've tried to describe to friends or family who had not experienced it firsthand, I've tried to explain it to them and describe it, and unless you've gone through and lived through something like that, you know there's no understanding it. Words fall short of trying to describe such a storm. A year later, we're still recovering, right? We're still removing trees, repairing homes, healing fearful hearts. Some storms are just simply unexpected and devastating. And storms do come, don't they? Sometimes literal storms, like Helene, even if it's only once in every 100 years or whatever. But as you know, most often it's the metaphorical storms that most endanger us, that most drive fear into our hearts. The loss of a job, the death of a loved one, a health crisis, the sudden deterioration of a friendship. So sometimes these storms come on faster and stronger than we ever could have imagined, and they can leave us reeling for months, years. We have no choice but to somehow forge ahead into a life that we know will never be the same. And I can't help but wonder, right? Like, how do we lean into hope in the midst of such danger, in the midst of such destruction? What hope is it that we as believers can carry with us? I hope to have some good news for you today. Through the poetry of Psalm 91, we're directed to the answer to that question. How do we lean into hope? Through the poetry of this psalm, we're directed to the answer to that question, which is this: make God both your home and your hideout. Make God both your home and your hideout. You know, whenever we read the Psalms, and really, as well as much of the Old Testament prophets, other sections in the Old Testament as well, we must remember what it is that we are reading, and that is poetry. And you read poetry differently. We have to read poetry in the Old Testament different than we're reading narratives, like if we're reading 1st or 2nd Chronicles, which I've been reading through lately. We read it different than we read the Gospels in the New Testament or the letters of Paul and others. And we have to read these differently, just in the same way as we would read poetry today differently than we would read the user manuals to like the fancy new air fryer that we bought. We would read that differently than the newspaper, for those of you guys that still get paper newspapers. We have to know what genre it is and how to handle it. How do we handle these features of poetry, like imagery and metaphor, the rhythm of them, line breaks and stanzas? And not all poetry has to have these elements, but they're common, of course. And one of the most notable elements of poetry that we might expect is rhyme. You know, like rhyme, that is sounds that bounce off each other, that echo each other, that cause us to have some momentum in the poem or cause it to stick in our minds better. And one of the curious elements, I think this is fascinating, one of the curious elements of Hebrew poetry is that it does have rhyme, but it does not rhyme sounds, it rhymes ideas. It doesn't rhyme in consonants and vowels that you would form with your mouth, but it rhymes in thoughts. So if you're ever reading a bit of poetry in the Old Testament and you feel like the author is just repeating themselves over and over again, you're not crazy. They are. And they're doing it for artistic reasons, but they're also doing it for emphasis reasons. Ancient Hebrew also did not have like a bold font. You know, like if you're typing an email to someone, you can type it in bold, or you can type in all caps, right? And if you're texting someone in all caps, and you just realize you're shouting to them, right? But we can do these things as a way of emphasis. Hebrew poetry, they would repeat things. They want to focus us on what it is that they don't want us to miss. Now, this is a fancy term you don't have to necessarily memorize, but it's called parallelism. Because the idea is that we have two tracks, two thoughts, two ideas that run parallel to each other. Just like lanes on a highway. They're going the same direction, but they're in different places. The words they're using are not exactly the same, but they're heading us in the same direction. Let me just show you a couple of examples from this psalm. This psalm is chock full of them. Almost every verse has some kind of parallelism happening. But right away in verse 1, for example, it says, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High, who abides in the shadow of the Almighty." Let's notice here where there's parallel words and images and thoughts happening. We have these verbs, dwells and abides. Well, that's the same kind of idea, to live somewhere, to be permanently rooted somewhere. They use this image of shelter or shadow. We can refer to God as the Most High and the Almighty. Two similar yet different ways of addressing God. Verse 14, I love this verse. "Because he cleaves to me in love, I will deliver him. I will protect him because he knows my name." These are maybe a little bit less obvious, but they're there. We have God saying, "I will deliver him, I will protect him." Well, which is it? Yes, right? Both. He's saying it two different ways. He talks about the person that cleaves to me or the person that knows my name. Well, is this person cleaving to you or do they know your name? Yes. And it can get a lot more rich and nuanced than that, but is that enough to help us get the picture? Right? You'll never read the Psalms again once you notice this. It's beautiful. But again, more than just like a cute FYI that now we know a little bit of how Hebrew poetry works, again, it's intended to help us meditate on the deeper meaning that is expressed in these words, in these rhyming ideas. Like what happens when we rub shelter and shadow together as images of protection or images of safety? Shelter calls to mind a structure that's built that offers protection from the rain or maybe even from wild animals that could get in. That's a shelter. Shadow, on the other hand, it invokes images of like this tall tree spreading its branches, offering relief from the heat of the sun. What happens when we consider he cleaves to me in love and he knows my name side by side? What we get is this picture of intimate connection. There's this closeness that God is expressing as he speaks in these verses. There's this commitment to this intimacy that pleases God, and he says, okay, I will deliver him. I will protect him because of this. Now, the crazy thing is we can take this idea and this understanding about rhyming ideas even further. It's fascinating that sometimes rhyming doesn't just happen within a single image or a single verse, but you can actually rhyme one section with another larger section. Whole chunks of verses can rhyme with other whole chunks of verses. Actually, within entire books, this happens. The entire book of Leviticus, this kind of happens. The entire book of Mark in the New Testament, the same thing happens. It's kind of wild. All of that is way too much for us today, and I know nobody signed up for like an MDiv class or anything, so we're not trying to go there. I just want you to understand that this can expand and be big and beautiful, yet still with the purpose of focusing us on something. And I mention this because this other element of Hebrew poetry, when we see it, can help us hone in on the main point the author's trying to make. And it's another element called a chiasm. And this word chiasm, it sounds like a fancy word. It's really not. It stems from, it calls to mind, it's coming from the Greek letter chi, which looks like this. Have you guys seen this letter before? This is the Greek letter chi. Now, what does chi look like to you? An X. Yeah, that's right. It looks like an English X. So see, this is really not as complicated as it sounds. They chose this term chiasm because of what an X signifies. Just like all good pirate treasure maps, X marks the spot. This is all you need to remember about this. That what can happen is rhyming Hebrew ideas will come closer and closer together in a text in successive levels until they converge on a center point, which is the heart of what the author is trying to communicate. It's his way of crossing and saying X marks the spot. And this is what's happening in Psalm 91. This is what the author is doing, whether we realize it or not. So I want to walk you through these. We're not going to reread every single verse. I'll pull out a few examples, but I want to show you what's happening. Let's see, Austin, go ahead and put those up. And you can see I've even done some indentation here to kind of help us see how it can form an X, right? It comes in at one angle, goes out at a different angle. And what we're looking at is this. Note how language from A, section A, rhymes with language from section A prime. That's just, again, a nerdy term, but the little apostrophe there. A rhymes with A prime, just like in English we would have rhyming A, B kinds of patterns. In A, the believer expresses confidence in God in these two verses. He says things like, "He who dwells in the shelter of the Most High will say to the Lord, my refuge and my fortress." In A prime, God is now speaking, and God affirms the confidence expressed by the believer. God says things like, "Because he cleaves to me in love, I will deliver him." The believer expresses confidence. God affirms and responds to that confidence. Then we can get deeper into the poem. This is kind of the larger chunk of the poem. Section B rhymes with section B prime. In B, we have like a variety of dangers and a variety of means of different ways of God's protection, verses 3 through 8. And then B prime, we have even more variety of dangers and means of God's protection. So notice some of these dangers. In B, we have dangers like the snare of the fowler, deadly pestilence, terror of night, arrows that fly by the day. In B prime, we see dangers like dashing your foot against a stone. I love it that God even cares about us stubbing our toes. Not just big things like lions and snakes, which are also in that section. But in B, we also have a variety of protections that God is offering. It says, he will deliver you. He will cover you. His pinions, which is part of a bird's feathers and their structure of their wings, talks about a shield. The second section, B prime, talks about he will give his angels charge over you. This is getting wild now. God's sending angels to protect us. He says they will bear you up. Like not just wings covering you, but wings now that can fly and lift you up away from the danger. So we see the rhyming that's happening here as we get closer and closer. Psalm 91 gets to the central message, which this time doesn't always work this way, but it happens to be one verse. Verse 9. Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your habitation. Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your habitation. The emphasis that the psalmist is giving us here in verse 9 is this: dwell with God. Dwell with God. Make God both your home and your hideout. Be with him, live with him, return to him day after day after day, just like you do when you go out to work or you go shopping, you always come back home. Rest in him, dine with him. But also when storms come, and they do. Those dangers surround this verse. Those dangers always surround us, but so does God's protection. He says, when storms come, run to him, cry out to him, trust in him for protection, depend on him for deliverance. Resist the urge to fight the storm on your own. Resist the urge to take matters into your own hands when you feel afraid. What the psalmist is trying to get at here is all of this danger that surrounds you, and then all of that protection that surrounds you, and your confidence in God and his affirmation of your confidence, all of this is extended to you. All of this protection is extended to you when you make God both your home and your hideout. Because you have made the Lord your refuge, the Most High your habitation. I want to talk about these words here because there's more parallelism happening in this verse. Do you guys see it? We have the Lord and we have the Most High. Well, which one is he? Yes, he's both. Is he your refuge or your habitation? Yes, he's both. Also notice, because you have made is implied in the second verse, by the way. This is where parallelism gets fancy. What the verse is meaning is, because you have made the Lord your refuge, because you have made the Most High your habitation, because you have done these things and approached him and interact with him in these ways, here's all this protection that is yours. But these two images that he uses, habitation and refuge, are important. Habitation, again, this is literally, it's a dwelling. It's an abode. It's your house. It's this human dwelling where people live securely, where hopefully in the best cases they are actually the safest, the most protected, where their nervous systems can calm down after being out in the world, after being surrounded by dangers. But we live here, and it's a place of belonging. Again, I know everyone's home and house does not feel this way, but in the best ways, this is what it is. It's a place of belonging, of community and relationship, of permanence and rest. This is not a temporary shelter. This is not camping. This is your established house. With God, what he's saying, with God as our habitation, this is a place that we are meant to have stability and rest. Stability and rest. Now, of course, in a literal sense, as Helene proved to all of us, even if you have a stable, restful home, crises can still strike. Emergencies still pop up. Hurricanes somehow make it 800 miles inland. Which is why we also need God as our refuge, he says. Our refuge. A refuge is a place of shelter, protection, safety. Like from rain or storm, from some kind of external danger. Perhaps we can get in our minds, right? In the ancient Near East, if you imagine this kind of arid, semi-desert landscape, this is like a mountain cave where someone can run to when a storm is threatening or enemies are threatening. The ancient Near East, they knew these dangers, whether it's storms or wild animals or raiding bandits. The feeling here is one of like, there is immediate danger. There's immediate danger. When you need a quick place of safety. Our dog still now, after Helene, if there's a bad storm, she now runs into the downstairs bathroom that's at the center of our house. She never did that before. She has her habitation, but she also knows where her hideout is. With God, we not only have stability and rest, but we have safety in crisis. He is both our permanent dwelling and our emergency shelter. We don't need a separate home. If we have a separate home and God is only our emergency shelter, we're missing something. If God is only our home but not our emergency shelter when we run to when storms strike, we're left vulnerable. And one might ask, maybe you're asking this question. Maybe this was just me by the time I got to this point in my own sermon this week. I'm like, that sounds great, Rodger. Making God both my home and my hideout, that sounds wonderful. But isn't that just more metaphor? Isn't that just more imagery? Like, what does that really look like in real life? What does making God our home look like in real life? What does making God our hideout look like in real life? Let me just make a couple of simple suggestions to you. First, in making God your home, establish daily rhythms of just being with Jesus. Establish daily rhythms of just being with Jesus. Just like whoever is in your home, you make daily rhythms of being with them. This is what we do with Jesus. And this might look a number of different ways. This might include prayer that you're voicing out loud. It might include silence. It might include scripture reading, where you're reading whole passages or books. It might involve meditation, where you just take one verse, one image, one word from the scriptures, and you just meditate on it. It might include fasting. It might include worship. It might include any number of practices that we can do. Those are just the tools. The goal is just to be with Jesus, to know his name, to cleave to him in love, as the psalmist says. And some of you today, maybe you need to make God your home. I'm not saying that in the sense of like you're not saved or something. Lord knows we can live our lives as Christians without having God as our home. I know I've ended up in seasons of my life where it feels like, where am I living? Where is my soul actually living right now? Oh, we constantly remake our home with God daily, daily, daily. Some of you, maybe that's where the Lord is drawing you today. For some of us, maybe we're here today and we need a hideout. Maybe storms are coming against you that just feel overwhelming. They're just going to destroy everything. I would suggest this. When a storm comes, turn to God in prayer, both privately and in community. When storms come, turn to God both privately in prayer and communally in prayer. We need to pray to God alone, just like this psalmist, and we're crying out to him. Sometimes we need other people to cry out on our behalf. Sometimes we need to raise our voices together. Sometimes we just need to bring someone outside of our situation in so that they can pray with us. And as Paul writes in Galatians, bear one another's burdens and so fulfill the law of Christ. I don't even know what that means. Fulfill the law of Christ. That sounds huge. That sounds important. And Paul says the way we do this is by bearing one another's burdens. And I know it can be really hard to let others bear your burdens sometimes. Sometimes it feels way too vulnerable to say, I can't handle this. Sometimes it feels like I'm just going to look like such a weakling if I say this storm feels so scary. But this is the continual invitation of the church to come to God both in prayer, privately, and in community. Church, make God both your home and your hideout. Establish daily rhythms of just being with him. And then make him your first go-to when dangers come. That first call you make. Those first words you utter. And answer in your own heart, how do you feel compelled to respond to God today? We're going to take just a few moments in prayer. Just responding to him however we want. And that might be in private. You're also welcome down here at the altar. That might be in community. Maybe you do need to grab someone else to pray with you, either in your seat or down here at the front, and say, here's the storm that's facing me. I need God to be my hideout. How do you need to respond to God in prayer today as a home or as a hideout?